For centuries, the African continent has borne the weight of colonial rule. European powers, with their insatiable greed, carved up Africa like a birthday cake. They drew borders, exploited resources, and imposed their will on the people. Colonialism was a system designed to benefit the colonizer, not the colonized. One of the most insidious aspects of colonialism was the attempt to erase African identity. Africans were told their cultures were primitive, their beliefs backward. They were forced to adopt European languages, religions, and ways of life. This cultural imperialism left a deep scar on the African psyche. The legacy of colonialism is still felt today. Many African countries struggle with poverty, corruption, and instability. The borders drawn by colonial powers often divided ethnic groups, leading to conflict and violence. The economic systems put in place by colonizers continue to benefit the West at the expense of Africa. The road to recovery from colonialism is long and arduous, but it is a journey that must be taken. Africans must reclaim their history, celebrate their cultures, and build a future free from the shackles of the past. Remember, to truly understand ourselves, we must first understand where we come from. Slavery, that horrific chapter in human history, inflicted unimaginable suffering on the African people. Millions were ripped from their homes, shackled and shipped across the Atlantic like cargo. The transatlantic slave trade was a crime against humanity, driven by greed and fueled by racism. But slavery wasn't just about forced labor, it was also about cultural genocide. When Africans were brought to the Americas, they were stripped of their names, their languages, their religions. They were forbidden from practicing their traditions, from telling their stories, from passing down their heritage. This systematic erasure of African culture had a devastating impact. It created a disconnect between Africans and their roots, leaving a void in their sense of self. Even after slavery was abolished, the legacy of cultural loss lingered, making it difficult for Africans to fully reconnect with their heritage. The fight to reclaim stolen heritage is ongoing. From the streets of Brazil to the shores of America, people of African descent are rediscovering their ancestral traditions. They are learning lost languages, practicing forgotten religions, and telling the stories that were silenced for so long. Africa had its own rich and diverse spiritual traditions long before the arrival of Europeans and Arabs. From the ancient Egyptians' reverence for the Nile to the Yoruba people's veneration of Orishas, African spirituality was deeply connected to the land, the ancestors, and the natural world. However, with the coming of colonialism and the spread of Islam, African spiritual traditions were often dismissed as paganism or idolatry. Missionaries sought to convert Africans to Christianity, often using coercion and manipulation. Islamic influence, particularly in North and East Africa, led to the adoption of new religious practices. This imposition of foreign beliefs disrupted ancient traditions and created a disconnect between Africans and their spiritual roots. Many were forced to abandon their ancestral practices or to practice them in secret. This disruption had a profound impact on African societies, leading to a loss of cultural identity and a sense of spiritual alienation. Despite these challenges, African spiritual traditions have shown remarkable resilience. Many Africans continue to honor their ancestors, practice traditional healing methods, and find meaning and purpose in their indigenous belief systems. There is a growing movement to reclaim and revitalize these traditions, recognizing their importance for cultural identity and spiritual well-being. It's no secret that many African nations face serious challenges: poverty, corruption, ethnic conflict, and political instability. While these issues are complex and multifaceted, they're often rooted in the long shadow of colonialism and the disruption of traditional governance systems. Colonial powers imposed their own systems of governance on Africa, often favoring a centralized, bureaucratic approach that disregarded traditional power structures. These systems were ill-suited to the diverse cultures and social structures of many African societies. The forced transition to these foreign systems created power imbalances, exacerbated ethnic tensions, and often led to corruption and mismanagement. Traditional leaders who once held significant authority and influence were sidelined or co-opted into the colonial administration. The legacy of these disruptions is evident in the political and social dysfunction that plagues many African countries today. Weak institutions, lack of accountability, and the erosion of traditional values have created a fertile ground for corruption, conflict, and instability.